And let me share the screen. Okay. Okay. So do you see a proposition written at your end? Is that a yes? Do you see something at your end?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I guess this is lecture 17. Yeah. Let's start. Last time we defined what are compact sets. Let's quickly recall that definition here. So we say that for a metric space X, D, E a subset of X, we say that E is compact in X provided every open cover of E admits a finite subcover. Yeah, which means that if U alpha is an open cover of K, which means that U alpha is a collection of open subsets in X that such that their union contains K, then there are finitely many indices such that K is contained in the union of those finitely many U alpha i's. Yeah. So we saw some examples, non-examples based on the definition last time. And so this doesn't seem like a very useful definition to work with. Yeah, how on earth do you check that given any open cover there would be a finite subcover, right? So in order to simplify that, we are working towards another definition or another equivalent criteria for compact sets. And in the process, we noted that a compact set in a metric space is necessarily bounded. That was one. And the second proposition is the following, that given any metric space xt, a compact set is necessarily closed. Yeah. So let me write down. So this is starting lecture 17 now. Yeah. So let's fix the proof for this proposition. So the way we are going to do is, we will, in order to show that K is closed, we will look at the complement of K, which is X minus K, and show that that set is open, right? So let's pick a point P in the complement of K. So what are we trying to show? We will show that there is a neighborhood of P that is contained in the set X minus K. All right. So towards this goal, what way we will do? So let's fix a point temporarily Q in K, and let's now P is a point which is fixed outside K. Yeah. So these two P and Q are distinct. So the distance between P and Q with respect to the metric D is strictly positive. You look at the distance dPQ between P and Q. This is a positive number divided by 2, and pick some positive real number R. Yeah, so R is positive. Yeah, so pick R, which is positive and strictly less than the distance between P and Q. Yeah? And now we do this procedure for each point Q in K. Yeah, so allow Q to vary in K and do that. So P is fixed outside K and Q is allowed to vary in K. So do that for each point in K. So you get, so for each point in K, you pick R, which is strictly less than the distance between 1/1/2 of the distance between P and Q. Yeah, so we label it as R subscript Q. Now, clearly, by definition, if you look at the ball centered at P radius RQ and intersect it with the ball centered at centered Q radius RQ, that would be empty, right? Why? Because the radius of this ball is strictly less than 1/2 of the distance between P and Q. Correct? Is everybody with me up till this point? Any questions? Please ask. Shall I take this silence as a yes and we go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. All right. So we know this property, right? Okay. Now what am I going to do? So let's consider the balls. I'm going to consider the ball in the metric space D, centered at Q, radius RQ. Yeah. Now Q was any point in the set K. So if I take the union over all these balls, as Q is allowed to vary in the set K, yeah. So I'll get balls, right? I'm using union of these balls. So evidently, so we note that evidently the set K is contained inside this union, correct? Yes? Now, what am I trying to say? I am trying to say that these open balls centered at Q, radius RQ, as Q is allowed to vary over the set K, they form an open cover of the set K. Yeah. Now, by assumption, the set K is compact, so there must admit a finite subcover of the set K corresponding to this open cover. Right? So let's write that down. Since K is compact, there exists finitely many points. I'm going to label them as Q1, Q2, and Qn. There exist finitely many points finitely many points such that what happens? Such that if I take the ball centered at Q1, radius RQ1, union with the ball centered at Q2, radius RQ2, and so on. Ball centered at Qn, radius RQn, then K is contained in this union. Yeah, is that okay? Everybody with me? All I'm trying to say is that corresponding to this particular open cover of K, since K is compact, there must exist a finite subcover. Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody? Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay. So I have these finitely many balls. Now what do I do? Yeah, let's look at the following thing. Yeah, so I have Q1, Q2, Qn and some radius fixed. Now let's consider. Remember, what are we trying to do? We are trying to construct a neighborhood of the point P. Yeah, P is a fixed point outside K, which is entirely contained in the complement of K, and I'll be done. Yeah. So towards that end, what am I going to do? I am going to consider the ball centered at the point P. Yeah, P is fixed with radius RQ1. Yeah, the same as here. Yeah, I intersect with the ball centered at P, yeah, radius RQ2. So on the ball centered at P, radius RQN. Yeah. So this is an intersection of finitely many balls, each centered at the point P and radius RQI, I varying from 1 to n. Correct? So each of these balls clearly is a neighborhood of the point P, right? Isn't it? Right? An intersection of finitely many these neighborhoods will again be a neighborhood, right? So this, now I'm going to say that let's set, what do I set? Let's set V to be, so let's consider this ball centered at P, radius R, where what is R? R is the minimum of RQ1, RQ2, and RQn. Right? So if you look at this ball centered at P, radius little r, then this is a neighborhood of the point P, correct? Is that correct? Is everybody with me? Yes, is that okay? All right. Now, what am I going to do? So let's look at this union. I'm going to give this name. Yeah, I'm going to call this set as W. What is W? W is the union of these balls centered at QI, radius RQI, reunion varying from 1 to n. Right? Now, V is a neighborhood of P. What am I trying to show? I am trying to show that there is a neighborhood of P that is entirely outside the set K, right? That will show that the complement of K contains a neighborhood of the point P, right? I am going to claim, my claim is that, so note having described these sets V and W as upstairs, I claim that the set V does not intersect the set W. Does everybody agree with me on this? Yes? See, why is this? This is true. This is true because of what I have written in red ink here. You know, we have chosen these radii in such a manner that none of these balls can intersect, right? Is that okay? Okay. Let me just mute people here. Okay, all right. So where have we reached? Yeah, so V intersect W is empty. Yeah, so this is saying, another way of saying this is the same thing. So which means that, that is, the set V is contained in the complement of the set W. Is that correct? Is that correct? Yes, but W is contains the set K. So if you look at the complements, the complement of W would be contained in the complement of K. Yeah. So what have we shown? Given a point P of K, given a point P outside K, there is a neighborhood V of the point P that is entirely contained in the complement of K. Yeah, so this is saying that x minus k contains a neighborhood of the point P. Now, P was any arbitrary point of the set x minus k, which means that the x minus k point, the set x minus k contains a neighborhood of each of its points, and hence it is open. Yeah? So let me write that down. So since P belonging to the complement of k was arbitrary, we have shown that x minus k contains a neighborhood of each of its points. Yeah. Conclusion, the set x minus k is open. Yeah. Which means that k is closed. And we are done. Is that okay? Yeah. We have been able to show that the set K is closed. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, so now that we have done this proposition, right? So, directly you can say, if you go back to the sort of examples that we discussed last time, you can, for example, example 2, which is open interval 0, 1, you can say that the set K in this example cannot be compact because K is not closed and a compact set has to be closed, right? But it is worthwhile, looking at constructing an open cover which admits no finite subcover for your own understanding, trying to prove that the set is not compact just from the definition. Okay. All right. So what have we shown? That every compact set in a metric space XT is necessarily closed and bounded. So it's sort of valid to ask if the converse statement is also true. Yeah. What would be a converse statement? That if is every is every, sorry, so what did we show? That if K is compact, then K is closed and bounded. But the converse statement would be what? That if K is closed and bounded, does that imply that K is compact? Yeah. So unfortunately, that is not true in general. So let me ask this question. So we have shown that conclusion. So conclusion is the following proposition. Summing up the above two proposition. So let given a metric space XT, and let K subset of X be compact, then K is necessarily closed as well as bounded. Yeah, so K is closed in X as well as bounded. Yeah. However, something to be noted down, the converse statement is not true in general. So what is the converse to this statement? That if K subset of X is closed and bounded, that need not imply that K is compact. Yeah, I'll give you an example. So let's consider example. Let's consider, so let X be the real line and D be the discrete metric. Yeah, so dxy is 0 if X equals to Y and 1 otherwise. Yeah, so now I am considering the real line with the discrete metric. Yeah. Okay. And what is the set that I am going to consider here? I am going to consider the set K as, so K is the entire set R here. Yeah. So the first observation is that K is bounded. Yeah. So the first observation is that in this example, K is bounded. Yeah. So I claim that, why is that? This is true since the set K, which is the entire real line, would be contained in, so I'm going to write this. This is the discrete metric here. And so let me just do anything. Yeah. So so this is the ball centered at the point 1 with respect to the discrete metric and radius 2. Does everybody see that this is true? See why this is the case? Because in the discrete metric, the distance between any 2 points is 0 and 1. Now, if I am looking at this ball, which is at centered 1 and radius 2, yeah, so the maximum value D can attain is either 0 and 1. Yeah, so everything will be in this ball. Is that correct? Is everybody with me on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Yeah, so you pick anything which is strictly greater than 1, meaning you can take the radius to be anything which is strictly greater than 1, and this would work, right? So the first observation is that K is bounded, right? So the entire real line is bounded when you consider the discrete metric. And the next observation is that K is closed also. Yeah. Why is K closed with respect to the discrete metric? Why is that the case? Why is R closed with respect to the discrete metric? Can somebody help me, please? Okay, so I
Ma'am,
would,
is it,
yeah, please go ahead, yeah.
ma'am, is it vacuously closed? I mean, since none of the point in the entire real line defined on the discrete metric space is a limit point, hence K is closed.
So
I
you're
think.
saying that this set has no limit points.
Um, yes, ma'am.
Let me think. Is that the case? So you pick any point and so you're saying no point of R is a limit point. So the limit point, the set of limit points is empty. So you are saying that, so that is why this set is closed. Yeah, give me a minute to think about it. Why is that the case? Can you please explain?
Ma'am, actually, if we take epsilon is equal to 0.5, for example, okay,
Okay.
ma'am,
Yes.
then the only point that x, and if we take an arbitrary point x, okay,
Okay.
ma'am, then the only point that exists in that epsilon neighborhood of
It's just right.
x,
Yes.
that is only x,
Correct.
and this is not the definition for a limit point, because for a limit
So you're
point
saying
every epsilon
every
neighborhood
neighborhood of x, so if x
must
were to be a limit point, then every neighborhood of x must contain a point of this different
of
from x, but
x.
that cannot happen for this neighborhood. Okay,
Yes,
good,
ma'am.
excellent. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so K is closed because K has no limit. Yeah. Okay, all right. So I'll just leave this for you to figure out. Yeah, because one of your friend has already done it. So is that Priyanshu?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Priyanshu. Okay, all right. So can I leave meaning this for the rest of you to figure out? We just discussed this orally, and I have just scribbled what Priyanshu said here without writing down the details. I'll just say hint. Is that okay? Can we go ahead? So anyways, the upshot of this discussion is that here I have a set which is closed and bounded with respect to the discrete metric on R, but I claim that K is not compact. So K is closed in XT, yeah, with respect to discrete metric, but I claim that K is not compact. It's not compact in this metric space. So why is that? Again, again, what is that I would need to show here? In order to show that K is not compact, I would need to exhibit an open cover of K that admits no finite subcover. Yes? Is that correct? So can you think of something like that? I think the solution is here on your screen. So does everybody see that? What am I trying to ask? See or meaning understand? All I'm asking is, can you give me a open cover of the set K in the discrete metric which has no finite subcover? Okay, so let me so I think it's actually there in what Priyanshu said, but let's look at this. So let's look at the point singleton x, yeah, where x is any real number. So as what Priyanshu said, that this is just the open ball centered at x radius half. So in particular, the singleton set is open in the discrete metric. Is that correct? So I'll just write that. Recall that. Is everybody with me up till this point? So hence, this is open in the discrete metric for each point x in R. Is everybody with me on this? Yes. So it means that we can consider this open cover. I can take this singleton set. So this is my U alpha. And what is the indexing set? The indexing set is the entire real line. Yes. So this in particular gives an open cover. Gives an open cover of K, which is the real line, with respect to the discrete metric. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And I claim that this open cover admits no finite subcover. That cannot happen. Why is that? Does everybody see that? And note that so no finite subcollection of this union can contain K. Yeah, so I should write a word here. So note that the union of any finite subcollection. Does everybody see that? So I see some hesitance here. So is that okay? See, everybody is with me up till the point that singleton x, as x is allowed to vary over R, this union, this gives an open cover of the set K with respect to the discrete metric. Yeah. Now, if this open cover had to have a finite subcover, then there would be finitely many points, x1, x2, let's say x100, such that their union covers K. But that cannot happen because K is an infinite set. Is that correct? Is everybody with me on this point? So am I audible here? Yes. Okay. So is that a yes or no with everybody? Any questions, please ask. Okay. So shall I assume this is okay with everybody and we proceed? Since there are no questions. Okay. All right. So is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. All right, wonderful. Yeah, so upshot of all this discussion was that here is a set which is closed and bounded in a metric space XT, but not compact, right? So the converse to this proposition is not true in general. Yeah, it's only a one-way implication that if K is compact, then K is closed and bounded. The converse is not true in general. Okay. All right. Let's see, where were we? Yeah, so we proved this proposition. Yeah, so the first thing that we proved today was that if K is compact, then K is closed. Yeah, so natural to ask, is the converse to this statement true? If K is closed, then does that imply that K is compact? Yeah, that's again not true, and we have already seen a counter example. Let me just highlight it. So the question that I am asking is that is every close subset E of a metric space XT compact? Yeah, so XT is a metric space. E is closed in X. Does that imply that E is compact in X? And the answer is no. In general, for example, let's take X to be the real line and D to be the Euclidean metric. And let's consider E to be the following interval. Yeah, we actually solved, we showed it when we were considering examples that this is not compact. Is this closed? Wait a minute, huh? I'll just take this back. I don't have to actually give this example. I'll take this example back. This is not quite correct. Okay. However, what is true is the following. Yeah. So a closed subset of a metric space may not be compact, as the above example shows. When you take so, however, what is true is the following. So let XT be a metric space closed subsets of compact sets are compact. Yeah, so what is it saying? That given a metric space XT, let K be subset of F be subset of X. Suppose that suppose that K is closed in X and F is compact in X, the theorem says then that it would follow that K is also compact. So does everybody present here understand what is the statement saying here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is that okay? All right. So then we proceed with the proof. So here is the setting. So we try to show that. So we will show that. Let's remind ourselves what are we required to do. We will show that K is compact. Right. So in general, closed sets may not be compact, but closed sets or subsets of compact sets are compact, right? So in order to show that K is compact, what is that we do? We know only one thing. We start with an open cover of K. We start with any arbitrary open cover of K in X and try to show that it is always possible to extract a finite subcover. Yeah, so let's do that. So let U alpha be an open cover of K in X. Yeah. So what does it mean? It means that, recall, this means that for each index alpha, U alpha is an open subset of X such that if you take the union over all these U alphas, that union contains K, right? Now, what are we required to show? We are required to show that K is compact, right? Okay, so let's draw a small picture here to understand what is happening. Yeah. So suppose that this is my set X. Yeah. So let's draw something bounded. Doesn't matter. Let's suppose that so F is what I have in blue. This is F, and in green ink, I am going to draw the set K. Yeah, so this is my K. Okay. Now, what have I started with? I have started with U alpha, an open cover of K in X. Yeah. So if you look at this picture in R2, then open covers means you look at open sets. Yeah. So which means typically in R2, this would be balls. Yeah. So look at these balls. Right. So these are U alpha, which I've drawn in black. Right. Now, what is that we are given to us? What is that we are given to us? We are given that F is compact, right? Now, F contains K, right? So, in order to use the compactness of F, what is that we need to do? Using U alpha, we need to construct an open cover of F. Now, how do we do that? Now, the U alphas that we consider here may not cover F, right? As this picture shows, the union of U alphas certainly covers K, but these unions of U alpha may not contain F. So what do? We need to invoke the compactness of F. We note that, so let's note the following. Yeah. So we note the following, that what is given to us? That F is compact, right? And K is closed. Yeah. So recall that. So let's recall that K is closed in X. Yeah, that's given to us, which implies that the complement of K is open in X. Correct? Yes. Which means that if I look at the following set, yeah, so I'm going to look at U alphas, right? Now, union of these U alphas, this gives an open cover of K, yeah, so this union contains K. And if I take the union with the set X minus K, Now this, now X minus K is another open set in X. Now if I take this union, that would be an open cover of F. Is that okay? Is everybody with me on this point? Now, why am I doing this? I am required to somehow, use the given information. I am given that F is compact. Now, the cover that I started with may not, the union may not contain F. Yeah? So I need to go a big, enlarge it a little bit. And this is one trick. Yeah. Now I use the fact that F is compact. So if F is compact, then there would be a finite subcover corresponding to this cover, right? Now, so since F is compact, by assumption, the above open cover of F must admit a finite subcover. Yeah. So which means that there exist finitely many indices what alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha n such that if I take the union, so let me write it carefully, u alpha 1 union u alpha 2 union all the way u alpha n union x minus k, this union contains F. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is that okay with everybody? Everybody with me up till this point? All I'm using is the compactness of F. Now, if I drop the set X minus K from this subcover, that means I just look at U alpha i's, then I claim that the union U alpha 1, union U alpha 2, union U alpha 1, this contains K. But not necessarily F. Is that okay? See, K is sitting inside F. And F is contained in the union of all these U alpha i's, these finitely minis, and X minus K. So if you look at the set K, that certainly does not intersect its complement. So K has to be contained here, right? There's no choice. Is that okay? So what have we shown? We showed that you start with any arbitrary cover U alpha i's, any arbitrary open cover of the set K, you are able to extract finitely many indices alpha 1 to alpha n such that K is contained in the union of those finitely many U alpha i's. Conclusion, any open cover of K admits a finite subcover and hence K is compact by definition. Any questions, please ask. So do I assume this is okay with everybody present here? Okay, so I don't get any response. So shall we go ahead?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. All right, thank you so much. So what has it been proved? Let's go back to the proposition. Given a metric space XT, closed subsets of compact sets are compact, right? Let's note down an immediate corollary, which is very useful in applications. Corollary to the above result. So let XT be a matrix space if F is closed in X. I should write down this close properly. If F is closed and K is compact, so I'm given two sets, F and K. F is closed and K is compact, then the intersection F intersect K, which is a closed set, is also compact. So the proof is straightforward once you note down the following observation. Yeah, so you note that so use the following fact that the intersection F intersect K is contained in K. Over here, K is compact and F intersect K, being the intersection of two closed sets, is closed sets. Yeah, so you have a closed set sitting inside the compact set. The previous proposition tells us that closed subsets of compact sets are always compact. Is that okay? So I'll just say use this to conclude. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Is that a yes with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. See, you may ask why are we so interested in compact set? They seem to have some obscure property, but hold on a little bit. When we see in some, maybe another 3 lectures or so, we would be able to do limits and continuity and things like that. Then you will see how compact sets actually behave very well like finite sets. So this is a very important property to be noted of. I'll maybe sort of highlight that when we come to that point. But until then, let's see some more interesting properties of compact sets. So here is a very useful application of compact sets, which would require the following definition. So let's note this definition. So a collection of sets G alpha, so alpha is varying over some indexing set I, is said to have the finite intersection property. So I am defining what is the meaning of finite intersection property. The acronym is FIP. If the following is true. So if you intersect G alpha, where am I intersecting? So the intersection is over alpha varying in some indexing set F. What is this indexing set F? F is some finite subset of the indexing set I. Yeah. So what is that I claim? So for every finite subset F of the index set I. Yeah, so I didn't complete the statement here. What happens? A collection of sets G alpha, where alpha is varying over I, is said to have the finite intersection property if you intersect any finitely many of G alphas, and that intersection is always non-empty. Yeah. So F is any finite subset of the indexing set I. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. This looks like what are we trying to do here? Example. Let's consider the following thing. Example. So let's take Gn to be open interval 0 to n. Yeah. So I am the real line with the Euclidean metric. And my indexing set here is the set of natural numbers. So open interval 0 to 1 by n, and little n is varying over the set of natural numbers. Yeah. So if I consider this intersection where n is allowed to vary over any finite subset f of the set of natural numbers, what can you say about this intersection? For every finite subset. So f is any finite subset of the set of natural numbers. Then what can you say about the intersection of GNs as little n varies over f? Is this empty? Is it non-empty? All I'm trying to ask is, do GNs have finite intersection property? Will somebody help me, please?
Ma'am, it should be non-empty.
It should be non-empty.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees? Everybody agrees? Yes. So GNs have the finite intersection property in this example. Is that yes with everybody present here? But please note that if I take the intersection over the set of natural numbers, then what do you get? If I intersect over all natural numbers, then what do you get?
Phi.
Phi, it is empty. Yes. So this set has the finite intersection property. No matter what finite subset f of the set of natural numbers you consider, the intersection is non-empty. But as soon as you allow the entire set of natural numbers, the intersection is empty. Correct? Is that okay?
Yes,
Is this
ma'am.
example okay with everybody? Huh? So where does compactness come into the picture here? The next proposition will tell that this cannot happen for compact sets. Yeah. So I'll sort of highlight. Let's write down the theorem, and we will get back to this example one more time. Yeah. So what does the theorem say? Suppose that let K alpha, where alpha varies over some indexing set I. So let this suppose that K alpha is a collection of compact sets. Right? With the finite intersection property. Yeah, so remember what it means is that that the indexing set I may or may not be finite, but if I intersect over any finite subset of I, the intersection is going to be non-empty always. Yeah? And top of it, what is that we are given? For each index alpha, K alpha is compact. Right? So then the theorem says that then if I intersect K alpha over the entire set I, that is necessarily empty, sorry, non-empty. Yeah. So in the above examples, you know, if GNs were to be compact, then this cannot happen. Then the intersection of GNs over the entire set of natural numbers has to be non-empty. Yeah, but please note that GNs are not closed here, so GNs cannot be compact. Right? So if you have a collection of compact sets having the finite intersection property, then there is a point which is in all of them. Yeah, so the intersection over the entire indexing set K alpha has to be non-empty. Is that okay? Does everybody follow the statement of the result? Is that a yes with everybody present here? Any questions, please ask. Okay, so I believe there are no questions, and let's go to the proof then. Now, please feel free to stop me if there is any sticky point. Okay, so what are we required to show? We are required to show that there is a point which is in all of these K alphas. Yeah, so suppose not. So let's see. So fix an element. This is a member of this collection, K alpha naught of this K alpha, as alpha varies in this indexing set I. Okay. Suppose that no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha, right? Is everybody with me? So which means that if X belongs to K alpha, then X does not belong to K alpha for any alpha different from alpha naught. Is this okay with everybody present here? So far, so good? Okay, so I don't get any feedback. So shall I assume this is fine and we go ahead? Okay, so let's do the following. Yeah, so let's consider. So I have to somehow arrive at a contradiction, right? So let's do the following. Let's consider consider G alpha as the complement of K alpha, right? Now, what are we given? We are given that each K alpha is compact. In particular, each K alpha would be closed in the metric space XT, yeah, because every compact set is closed, which would imply that each G alpha is open for each index I, yeah, by virtue of being complement of a closed set. Okay, I claim that the following is true. Yeah, I claim that the sets G alpha, where alpha varies over the indexing set I, but for singleton alpha naught, this forms an open cover of K alpha naught. Yeah, so that means what? That means that K alpha naught is contained in the union G alpha, alpha allowed to vary over the indexing set I, but alpha cannot be alpha naught. Yeah, because you know G alpha is the complement of K alpha. So K alpha naught certainly cannot be contained in its complement. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. So this statement is true. Now, this having constructed an open cover of K alpha naught, now we invoke the compactness of K alpha naught, which tells us that there must be a finite subcover of K alpha naught corresponding to this open cover. Yeah. So let's write that down. So since K alpha naught is compact, there are finitely many indices. There are finitely many indices. So let's give them some name. Alpha 1, alpha 2, all the way till alpha k, such that what happens? Such that if I take the union of these finitely many indices, that contains K alpha naught. Yeah, so this union is contained in G alpha 1, G alpha 2, all the way up to G alpha k. Correct? But remember, what is G alpha? G alpha are by definition the complement of K alpha. Yeah. So this is exactly saying it follows that this implies that K alpha naught intersect K alpha 1, intersect K alpha 2, all the way till K alpha k is empty. Correct? But this contradicts the assumption that the given collection of sets has finite intersection property. And hence we are done. So this contradicts the assumption that finite intersection property holds for the given collection K alpha of compact sets. And that's it. We are done. So is this bit okay?
Ma'am, can you please explain from the point that G alpha forms an open cover, that portion?
Okay.
From
So
that
let
onwards, it was unclear.
Right. So this part is clear. You know, G alpha is x minus K alpha. Let's define G alpha to be x minus K alpha. Right. We are given that each K alpha is compact. Yeah. Now recall that every compact set is closed, which means that K alpha is closed. So therefore, the complement of K alpha, which is x minus K alpha, is open. So each G alpha is open. That much is clear, Priyanshu?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now I claim that, so if I take all these alphas and I consider the collection of these G alphas, they form an open cover of K alpha naught. Now, you know, why am I leaving this set alpha naught here? Does that make sense? Because, you know, alpha naught, if you consider G alpha naught is, so I'll just write that down rather than just speaking. So, you know, if you look at G alpha naught is X minus K alpha naught. I cannot include G alpha naught here. That doesn't make sense. You know, K alpha naught does not intersect its complement, right? So that's the only reason I am leaving alpha naught out of the indexing set. Now your question is, why is this union, this is true? Why is this true? Is that your question is?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, you know, see, our assumption is this. Suppose that no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha. Yeah, so let's just unwind it. So this means that if X is a point in K alpha naught, then X does not belong to K alpha, and this is true for every alpha different from alpha naught. Is that correct?
Okay,
You
ma'am.
agree? Yeah, you agree with this?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, you know, this is exactly saying that if X belongs to K alpha naught, then X belongs to the complement of K alpha, which is G alpha, for every alpha different from alpha naught. Yeah, so that's what I have written here. Is that okay?
Ma'am, shouldn't
Well,
it be
for
for
some,
some?
yeah, you were right. You're right. Thank you, Priyanshu. I'll just make that change. Yeah. So this is for some. So this is for some at both the places. Thanks a lot. Yeah, that's what is it saying. So no point of G alpha, K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha. So if X is in K alpha naught, so then there is some alpha different from alpha naught to which X does not belong, right? So this is for some. For some. You're right. Thank you so much for this correction. Yeah. So is that okay now, Priyanshu? This point
Yes,
is
ma'am.
okay? Yeah. So that's
Yes, ma'am.
exactly, you know, in the language of mathematics, you know, then it means that K alpha naught is contained in the union of G alpha, where alpha is varying over the indexing set I, but for the point alpha naught. Correct?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Now you use the fact that K alpha naught is compact, get a finite subcover. You know, so let's get these indices alpha 1 to alpha k, which means that K alpha naught is contained in the union of these finitely many G alphas, which exactly means using the fact that G alpha, so I'll just write it in reg. So recall that G alpha is just the notation, the complement of K alpha. So this means that K alpha naught does not intersect this set, right? K alpha
Yes.
1 intersect K alpha naught, but this cannot happen because we assume that the collection of sets K alphas exhibit the finite intersection property. Yeah, so there are finitely many of these sets which have empty intersections. So this is a contradiction, which means that there cannot be this supposition is incorrect. You know, this one. Let's suppose that no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha. Yeah, there would be a point of K alpha naught that belongs to every K alpha, and that point is precisely the point which is in the intersection of K alphas. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was good. All right. So everybody is with me up till this point? Any questions, please do ask. Okay, all right. So if there are no further questions, let's note down a corollary to this result. So if Kn, so n is a decreasing sequence of compact sets and I also make sure that this is each of them is non-empty compact sets. So what do I mean by so non-empty, everybody understand. Compactness also we have some idea. What is a decreasing sequence of sets? So which means that let a Kn plus 1 is contained in Kn for each index n. Yeah. So then, you know, so then clearly Kns have finite intersection property, yeah, because of this property that Kn plus 1 is sitting inside Kn for each index n. Yeah. So the above result says that that the intersection of Kns is necessarily non-empty. Yeah, there would be a point which would be common to all of these Kns. Correct? Yeah, all we have to note down is that the Kns in this example certainly have the finite intersection property. Is that okay? Everybody with me up till this point? Any questions? Okay, so I believe there are no questions. So, you know, this was a bit of general information about compact sets in a metric space. We will come back to this. But however, you know, it will be nice to have some more information about the compact sets sets in the Euclidean space. Yeah, so let's try to unravel that. So compact sets, compact subsets of the Euclidean space. Yeah, which what do I mean here? I mean here consider the set Rn with the Euclidean metric, and is it possible to characterize compactness here? Right. Of course, you know what we discussed earlier. All those are valid here, but can we say something more? So let's start with for understanding a few examples first. Okay, so the very first example, which is in fact a very important one, is that consider the closed interval AB, closed and bounded interval AB. This is compact in the Euclidean metric on R. So A and B are both real numbers here, right? So let me write that down here. So let A and B are any arbitrary real numbers. I am not allowing extended real numbers here. Only real numbers and the closed. So this is a closed interval certainly, and also bounded. This is compact in the Euclidean metric on R. This is the very first and I would say one of the most important examples of compact sets. Okay. So how do we go about sort of establishing this fact? We go by the definition. Yeah. So we have to show that you start with an open cover and show that of the interval AB and try to show that there is always a finite subcover. Okay. So how do we do that? Yeah. So suppose not. Suppose this is not true. So that would mean that if the set AB is not compact, then there is an open cover of the interval AB that has no finite cover. Yeah. So let's start with that assumption and let's somehow try to arrive at a contradiction. Suppose there is an open cover of the interval AB that has no finite subcover. Yeah. So let me give this open cover a name. Let me give it G alpha. Yeah, where alpha is in some indexing set I. Okay. So if that is the case, then I claim that then look at the following intervals. Then I claim that at least one of the intervals A to A plus B by 2 and A plus B by 2 to B, this fails to have a finite subcover. Correct? Why? Because if both of these intervals have finite subcover corresponding to this open cover, that would imply that the open interval AB has a finite subcover corresponding to this open cover, and that is not the case, right? So there is at least one of these two intervals which fails to admit a finite subcover. So I don't know which one, so I label the one which fails to have a finite subcover as I1. Label it as I1. Yeah? So I1 is one of the intervals, either A to A plus B by 2 or A plus B by 2 to B. I am going to write it as A1, B1. Yeah, where A1 is either A or A plus B by 2 and B1 is the corresponding thing appropriately. Yeah, so that but nevertheless, whether I1 is A plus B by 2 or A plus B by 2 by B, one of the thing is the following two things hold true. Yeah, so A1 is greater than or equal to A, but strictly less than B1, and B1 is less than or equal to B, and this is true, and the length of the interval I1, which is B1 minus A1, is certainly B minus A by 2, no matter what A1 and B1 are. Correct? Now, let's recall. So, I1 is the interval which fails to have a finite subcover corresponding to the open cover G alpha. Yeah, I am going to apply this argument one more time, and I am going to say that at least one of the intervals A1 plus B1 by 2 or A1 plus B1 by 2 A2 fails to have a finite subcover. Because if not, if both these intervals do have finite subcover, that would imply that the interval I1 will have a finite subcover, which is not the case. So I get hold of one of them which fails to have a finite subcover, and I am going to label it as I2. I2 is, so let's call it A2, B2, where I don't know which of these intervals is I2, but I can claim this one, that A is less than equal to A1, is less than equal to A2, which is strictly less than B2, and B2 is less than equal to B1, and B1 is less than equal to B, and the length of the interval I2, which is B2 minus E2, A2 is it is what? It is B1 minus A1 by 2, which is B minus A by 4. Correct? Yeah. And now you continue in this manner. Yeah. So we continue in this manner to obtain for each n bigger than 2. So you continue in this manner. So at each stage, you get an interval in. We obtain for each n an interval in. So in, I am labeling it as an, bn, such that a is less than equal to a1, is less than equal to a2, so on. Somewhere I will have an, which is strictly less than bn. This is less than equal to bn minus 1, and so on. At some stage you will have bn, which is less than equal to b. Correct? And the length of the interval in, which is bn minus an, would be b minus a by 2 to power n. Yeah. And what is the property of the interval in? That the interval in fails to have a finite subcover, such that, this is true, such that in equal to an bn fails to admit a finite subcover corresponding to the open cover G alpha. Okay. Okay. So what is that I have here? So I started with the interval AB. So let me label that here. And then I got the interval A1, B1. So A1 is here and B1 is here. And then I got A2 and then I got B2, and some point I have AN and some point BN. Yeah. So what is that I get? I get a nested sequence of intervals here. Yeah. So let's summarize. What is that we have? We have so the interval I is equal to closed interval AB contains the interval I1, which is the interval A1, B1, contains the interval I2, contains the interval in, and all of them. So this is a nested sequence of closed intervals, correct? So I'll just summarize what is that we have done so far and then stop. This is the first thing. We have a nested sequence of closed intervals with the property that each in is not covered by the union of any finite subcollection of G alpha. Yeah. For each index n, in is not contained in the union of any finite subcollection of G alphas, right? And the third thing that we did was we also could write down something about the length of these intervals, which would imply that if x and y are in the interval in, then the distance between x and y is bounded above by the length of the interval in, which is given by b, which is b minus a by 2 to the power n, right? Okay, so I think I'll stop right here for today, and we continue from this point next time onwards. So let me stop the recording. If you have any questions, we can take them up.